Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today on Masechtas Nazir daf Mem, we are going to begin on Mem Amud Aleph, the sixth line from the top, Rav Chisda. So we were learning in yesterday's daf that there is the obligation at the end of the Nazirus to shave one's hair. And we learned that it's necessary that we must use a ta'ar. We have to use a razor. And we derived it from different sources, and with this we continue. Rav Chisda, Lilkois ba'achas. Says the Mefarsh, Im gilach toich melois ser achas loike. Even if you would remove one hair, if you would shave off one hair, you're already going to get malchus. La'akev b'shtayim. What does that mean? It says Mefarsh, Im gilach kol sa'aro b'tekalachas. If let's say you would shave off all of your hair, Naziruso, with at the end of Nazirus, Visharbo Beis Sa'aros, you just didn't cut two hairs, Lo Asalo Klum. It has to be, all of it has to be cut off. Even if you would have left two hairs, that's Ma'akib, that's not considered to be a Galachas. And then the Listor, and the Soisa El Baroi Baroi Shel Vatar. To be Listor, says the Mefarsh, Im Gilach B'toichim Nazirusai. Let's say again, if bandits cut your hair off during your Nazirus, so the din is, Im gilach has rov rosha batar, if the majority of it was cut off, then it will be seiser, which means you have to count the next another 30 days, as we saw in yesterday's daf. And it's only batar, it's only if it was with a razor. So where it says batar in, b'midachin lo, it's only when it comes to with a razor, but no other means of removal of the hair. Abitani, but we learned before, we included all other forms of removal. El ema tar. It doesn't mean dafka razor, but the other ways of removal must be similar to that of a razor, in which that when you remove it, it has to be, as the Mefarsh says, Kol hamavirin somach ikrin. It has to be by the root. Basically, it's like a razor completely removes the hair in its entirety. So too, any other means, like plucking it out, for example, if you do it kein tar so close, then it's comparable to a razor, and then in fact the dinim apply the same. Tani mihachi Nazir shetolish mirat sifsaf kolshahu. A Nazir who removes, again with these different mechanisms other than a razor, kolshahu, eno seiser el b'rayv uvatar. And it says you're not seiser unless you cut off the majority and with a razor. Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda Eimer Mishum Rav Shimon, he said in the name of Rav Shimon, Keshem shishtei saros ma'akvois bo. Just like if you would shave properly, but you left two hairs, that's ma'ak. If you didn't do a proper giluach, so too, during the time, if you look in the Mefarsh, it's not that you have to cut off the majority of your hair. Even if you just remove two hairs, that's enough. Okay, which will be question 10, and then we'll see TV 16 too. So question 10 asks, Kama shir tegalachas hanazir listor. So it's a machlokas. Either it's rov rosho or even two hairs. TB 16 just adds an extra wrinkle, so we'll actually read it, even though it's a similar question. Ma'oshir hagiluach lilkois, which we said is just one hair. La'akev b'tekalachas mitzvah v'listor. So when it comes to what is ma'akev, that's two hairs, and listor is maybe also two hairs or roiv roishoy. Okay. So let's now continue. Tanan Hasam. So we learned over there that shloisha migalchin v'tigalchin mitzvah. There are three situations in which there is an element of cutting hair, and it's actually a mitzvah to do so, which is actually going to be question TA 15, which seems to be a pretty easy question if you remember them. Ela shloisha migalchin tigalachas mitzvah batar. What are the three? So here they are. Nazir. So the end of Nazirus, we've been learning you cut the hair. Umetzaira, also at the end of being a Metzora, one of the steps is that all the hair is removed, including the beard. Levim, as well as when it comes to the beginning stages of being a Levi for the avoda, that's also part of the process. The kulon shegilcho shlobatar. Anytime if any of these people did shave but without a razor, or shishir shtei saros, or they even left 2 hairs, los v'klum. That's ma'akev. So again, it has to be a tar. Question is, it's kain tar. Doesn't say, but it's stam. That's what it means. And also, it has to be that it's completely cut off. Omer Mar, Shlosh Megalchen v'tegalachtan mitzvah sobshita. So it seems to be a double portion. Why? What's the point? So Mafar says the Megalchen bekuhu mafarshi behu kroi benazir ksiv v'gilach nazir. By Mitzayr it says in Sefer Vayikra v'gilach as kol saro. You have to cut off all his hair. By Levim it says vaviru taral kol besarim, that the hair is removed with a razor. So we heard he had these beferish psukim. So why is it necessary to list them? So mahu detema mishum avri serhu. You would think the whole element is that you just have to remove the hairs. Therefore, if you feel sach nasa kamash madalo, you would think maybe you can even use some type of cream or some sam that removes hair, kamashmon, that's not enough. You actually have to do some element of tegalachas, of actually shaving, not by putting some type of a cream or the like. That would not be good. So before we go weiter, if you see this tais of sluster in the selim came gleich rov rosho v'kulin hin halacha b'nazir shulmatzin b'hen tam. These are all halach. This whole notion of how much hair removed the seiser, that's all halach Moshe Sinai. Katani, so we learn like this. It says that all these different people, these 3 situations, a Nazir, Mitzayr, a Levi, if they would have their hair removed without a razor, they did nothing. Now, Bishlam and Gabi Nazir, I can understand, because the pasuk says Tar Yavar al Rosho. It says explicitly that mentions a razor. The Gabi Levim Ksiv Vaviru Tar al Kol Basarim. So it mentions the notion of a razor, that it's not allowed then, which is mashma, the purification process. That is when it's supposed to be done at the end. However, the question is, El Mitzayra B'Tarminol, and how do we know anything by Mitzayra? Because by Mitzayra, it just says V'gilach es kol sa'aro. It doesn't mention the word razor. It doesn't say tar. So how do we know that the din also by a Mitzayra is with a razor? So why don't we learn out from Levim? Just like a Levi has to remove their hair with a razor, so too a Mitzayra. Now, Mal Levim shekein tu'unin tegalachas. When it comes to the Levim, they require tegalachas, the shaving, then tegalchtan el batar, and it has to be with a razor. So afani avia as a Mitzayra shehu tain tegalachas. We know he has to have his hair removed. Then tegalachta el batar. So why don't we just learn out again from a Levi? There's a problem with that comparison, because mal Levim shechein tu'unin tenufa begufam. We actually require, when it comes to the Levim, one other element is that we actually will lift up their bodies. Says the Mafarish, v'henif aronis halavim tenufa lefnei Hashem. They actually are. There's another process. What's done? V'hoyel u'tu'unin tenufa machmirin behu. Kulihai, we're so strict that they require such a thing. Maybe that's why we're strict that you need a razor. The Mitzayra, there's no din tenufa on their bodies. So since we're already lenient by Mitzayra, how do we know it has to be with a razor? So you can't learn out from a Levim. Okay, because Levim have this notion of tenufa begufo. Okay, fine. So on this, the Gemara can maybe use a sada shava, because Nazir yochiach. So Nazir will prove you that even though a Nazir, there is no din tenufa on a Nazir, but nonetheless it's with a razor. So someone learn from there. We should learn from the Nazir. So too by a Mitzayra that it has to be with a razor. Yeah, mal Nazir shchein karbano toin lechem. When it comes to, as we said, a Nazir, one of the processes is that one of the 3 karbanos that are brought requires lechem. It's accompanied with bread. So maybe because there's the stringency of a requirement of the accompaniment of bread, so maybe that's the reason why we're strict and also require a razor, but maybe not by Mitzayra. So Levim yochicho, because Levim don't have, there's no requirement of carbon with bread, nonetheless they're chayiv with a razor, so one to one out from there. V'chayzer adin. So you can keep basically going back and forth. We find that when it comes to a Levi, he has one characteristic which is unusual, and that he requires to do for begufo. And when it comes to the Nazir, he has another stringency in which has to do with lechem. However, those reasons are clearly not reasons why to require or not require a razor, because the other ones don't have those qualities. So asad shosh behen, but what is the common denominator between those two? Shein teudin tegalachas tegalachtan batar. So the razor. So afani avi asamatzara shehu tein tegalachas tegalachtan batar. So therefore, we should be able to learn out through the means of a sada shava that just like Mitzayr, just like a Nazir and a Levi require razors, so does Mitzayr. So Amalei Rava mibarnish. Ravashi v'lifrach. Why don't we ask a different question? As we continue to Mem on Bebeis, we could still ask a question on this. Ein karbono bedalus. That when it comes to all these other cases, there's no carbon bedalus for poor. Taimer b'mitzar shekarbono bedalus. So that is question number one. Look in Taisvis, el carbon kavua be'anim b'nashirim. When it comes to a Levi, when it comes to a Nazir, it's the same carbon. It doesn't matter if you're rich or poor. But a Mitzayra, if you're poor, you can bring birds. You can bring Sipar Mitzayra. And therefore, maybe since we're lenient, we allow even birds for the carbonos for a Mitzayra, so maybe we also don't require tar either. So that's question number one. Jamali Rava Bar Mishrashil Rava, Hai Tana Mikara. Originally, this Tana thought the Omer Lamadim Mitzayra. That to learn from Mitzara Iyasher, you can't learn. Shein donin kal mechamor l'hachmerlav ahadar amar neilif medina namilo yolif. It's the second question. The Tana knew before that a Mitzara l'chor was with a razor, and tried to learn it to Nazir. But here we don't know the source of Mitzara. It's very hard to understand because we said that a Nazir is actually more kal. Okay, fine, it requires bread, but we said that a Nazir's kal and a Mitzara is chomer, because a Nazir you only shave your hair, but a Mitzara you shave even the beard. We're much more strict. So we actually already learned on the previous Amud, actually on the very top of Mem Amud Aleph, which we saw at the end of yesterday's daf, that we weren't able to learn out the requirement of a Nazir from a Mitzayra because a Mitzayra is more chomer. So then all of a sudden, it doesn't make any sense that right now, again, the Tana must have known already that the Mitzayra is with a razor. So that statement over there is liba the shita of the Rabbanan. Says the Mefarish, Tani lamanu mitzayra iyasher damash mibshita lidim mitzayra havibatar. So, according to the sheet of the Rabbanan, that is how we explain that Gemara over there on the top of Mem Amud Aleph. However, here, Rabbi Eliezer did not chayiv ad shilkatenu batar. We said that you're only going to be chayiv only if this is brought down in Makos, that you're not chayiv, says, that's what the Mefarish says, you're not chayiv on hakafas harosh, on shaving off your hair, which removal of the payas is not allowed, or the beard, ad shil katena batar, unless you actually use a razor. Even if you would use pincers and removers, so you would also be chayiv in that situation. So in that situation, we see, according to the sheet of Rabbi Eliezer, he says that things are not required with a razor. So over there, when we talked about the Mitzayra, so we said that the din is like the Rabbanan, and therefore they understood as the Devar Pashta that the Mitzayra has to be a batar. But according to Rabbi Eliezer, he doesn't require, even when it comes to a kafas rosh, that he says that you're going to be chayiv even if you don't use a razor, even if you just remove your hair from other ways. That's also an isser of hakafas harosh. So my time in the Rabbanan, what is the reason by the Rabbanan that the only time there's an issue of hakafa, of removing your hair, is only with a razor? Desanya zikana, it mentions in the pasuk a beard, and the entirety of this pasuk is the lengthy pasuk. So it's brought down Torah Hashalim, v'haya b'yom hashvi, on the seventh day of a Nazir's counting, yigalach es kol sa'aro, so he should cut off all of his hair, That's rosho, vesikanoi, his hair, his beard, v'es gabos einav, his eyelashes, v'es kol saro yigaleach, everything. The Chibur says begadav, he should wash his garments, v'rachatz es besar b'mayim v'tahir, and then he will immerse himself into a mikvah, and that is how he will become pure. So this is actually by, again, a Matzaira. So this is not, I don't know if I said that. So it's talking about a Matzaira. So on the seventh day is the mitzvah to galachas. And you have to remove all hairs, even the beard. So we know that a person is not to cut off the corners of one's beard either. You would think that when it comes to a Matzaira, because there's an isser of cutting off your payas, or cutting off the corners of your beard, so maybe you're not allowed to shave off your beard even as a Matzaira. So therefore the pasuk says the kanai that it doesn't make any difference. He's still mechuyev to have that removed. How do we know that when he does remove the hair from his beard, it should be with a razor? The Sanya. You would think when it comes to the Isser of just stop removing your hair, if you would do it with scissors, it's only something which causes a destruction. You would think if you use pins and removers, that you would also be chayiv, because that also destroys. It also mentions not to shave. So pincers and removers, these items are not things in which are an element of shaving, even though they do destroy. So the only thing which has both aspects is a razor, something in which shaves, a razor shaves, but also destroys. So therefore, we see from here that a Metzora must cut with a razor. It is only as the Isser of cutting the beard, it is only as the Isser of cutting the beard is only with a razor. So it's the same idea. So that's the whole statement. And we're saying, so we understood when it comes to on the previous Amud that a Matzaira is only with a razor is a fi the sheet of the Rabbanan, because he compares it to the Isser of cutting your hair, your beard in general. Cutting your beard in general is only also with a razor. And therefore, when it says by Matzaira zikanam ufasik ziknam, so obviously that's telling you, or zikno rather, that word is telling you that you are allowed to do what you're normally not allowed to do, which means you use a razor. So therefore, that, according to the Rabbanan, is pashut. However, according to the sheet of Rabbi Eliezer, he holds that you could have violated the Isser of Fasekanam Ligalechu even without using a razor. So therefore, it's not pashut either when it comes to a Matzaira. How do we know that you must use a razor? Right? So you can't make that connection. So that's why we had to use this Mamatzino to try to figure this out, or this Asada Shava, in which, again, we ended up asking the question of in Karbono Badalos. So Mamai, the Gemara says one second, how do we know? Dilmo Olam Afil Liknu B'Melkan Verhitni Nami Mitzakavid. How do we know when it comes to a Matzaira, according to the sheet of Rabbi Eliezer, that there's an that the mitzvah is only accomplished with a razor? Maybe if you remove the hair in any other ways as well. And the whole chiddush is just like the Rabbanan said, that to be chayiv on your beard is only with a razor. So too, the removal of the hair of the Matzaira is only with a razor. Rabbi Eliezer, maybe he holds that actually the mitzvah could be with any matter, and it's just coming to tell you that even with a razor, you're not going to be chayiv. In other words, a Matzaira, even though it's true, normally you're not supposed to use a razor, but he's just saying that you're allowed to use a razor. But it may not necessarily mean that a dafka has to be a razor. Maybe it could be in any other matter. If you want to tell me, in fact, that you could use it in any way, and that removal of the hair in any way would still work, so if that's the case, lishta kromine, let the pasuk be silent with regard to the word of zikanai. I would know. Umagabi nazir, when it comes to a nazir, the isurika avid, that the fact that by being a nazir is an isser by itself, avil hachi mechayiv, nonetheless, he's going to be chayiv by cutting off his payas. So hacha the mitzvah, lo kol shekain, over here it says the Mafarish, the bechol davar mutter legalech b'fil batar, that with all matters it's going to be mutter, even with a razor. So that's the question that's being posed. So as we continue, mem alpha manalf the su, and furthermore, if you really want to tell me that when it comes to a mitzvah, that he ends up not shaving with his beard with a razor, but rather he uses all these other methods, that it actually works. And when it comes to his beard, it's just coming to matir that you could use a razor if you want to. So says the Mefarish Adarabba, you would maybe think the opposite logic. Midolo kasa beitar, the fact that it by Mitzvah does not mention a razor, having mean the Batar lo mystery klal. Maybe you're not allowed to use a razor, not that you can get away with it. Maybe the fact that it doesn't mention it at all regarding a Mitzvah, it doesn't say the word tar. So therefore, maybe you're not allowed to use a razor. Midolo ksiv tar b'Mitzvah b'yaminulach karesh lakish. You would maybe think like Rish Lakish, we're going to see in a second. Yomer kol machem shatem moitzav v'chulu. So let's hold off, and we're going to see the rest of this Mefarish in a second. So what would you say? That if you want to tell me that if you could remove it in any other way, it's still a mitzvah, because of tar, so karesh lakish, so maybe you taka should not use a razor. If let's say you have a mitzvah saseh and a mitzvah slo saseh, and it's a conflict, if you could do the mitzvah saseh without violating the lo saseh, better to do that. So otherwise, you're right, an aseh could be doicha lo saseh. Says the Mefarish, better that you should not use a razor. Maybe you should use other methods. So you've removed all of your hair properly. However, you did not violate the isser of removing your hair with a razor. So maybe it's better not to use a razor. So says the Mefarish, because the whole isser is only with a razor. So therefore, you can avoid the issue of the violation of shaving your beard as long as you don't use a razor, and yet you can still be mekayim the mitzvah saseh as a mitzvah to remove the hair without a razor. So shema mina the hachi itzrach zakanai. This is the reason why, says the Mefarish, why Dafkin mentions zakano, the beard, by the mitzvah lishtri tar b'mitzvah, to tell you, because otherwise you would think don't use a razor. So the fact that it mentions zakanai, it's telling you that extra word is telling you that in fact you could use a razor when it comes to a matzara, and perhaps even you are supposed to. Okay, we're going to stop there. Let's see, maybe we have another question or two that pops up here. Maybe question 11. Okay, we're going to hold off for question 11. We're going to probably see it better in tomorrow's daf. Let's see. Okay, a lot of these questions are similar. I'm not going to say them until tomorrow. Adkan.